will be the ones standing in the front of the
So sit in the chair, then we won't be able to see you.
So you can sit here when I'm standing up. And once we're walking the chair, we'll be doing it.
Okay. You can promise that?
We'll keep that. We'll keep it.
Thank you.
Keep that.
Cool, yeah. So
And are you
that
with,
would work for you.
is there anything special that they
The getting off the seat, yeah.
or is it kind of
Here's what that. Oh, yes. I'm so happy to see you. Good.
So excited about this. Yeah, no, but because it's exciting what we are getting at.
So they're studying super soldiers and all the different things. That's cool. Oh, good. I was wondering, Jim being 6'5", I was like, I don't know. But Jessica did good. Yeah, I know one I did. Where is he at?
Today, and we're doing a site
This time of year, they tried to ends up murdering somebody. And then we were
I was asking.
get it back in. Thank you, everyone, for coming. I'm Paul Shari, Senior Fellow here at CNAS and Director of our Technology and National Security Program. I am super pumped about today's event. We do a lot of stuff like this at CNAS. I'm very excited about this one. We have today a demonstration of one of these technologies that we talk about, that we work on, that's included in our report. We don't always get to do this. There are lots of things that we work on that we can't squeeze into this room. We can't jam a fighter jet in here. But today we have a chance to take a look at a real operational exoskeleton prototype and get a sense of what it can do. I'm going to talk for a few minutes, and then I'm going to get out of the way before I get booed off stage. A chance to see this and then ask some questions. I want to talk first about the work that's behind the CNAS Super Soldiers project. Today is the culminating event of this project. We've been rolling out a series of reports over the last 6 months. You have in your chairs a hard copy of the summary of the key findings and recommendations from that series. And the full report is online at cnes.org/supersoldiers. You can please check it out. A little bit about this project. This project was funded by the Army Research Laboratory and was really motivated by a desire to better understand how we can protect dismounted warfighters. So infantry troops, special operations forces who are out on the front lines. And so very pleased that we were able to get approval from the Army to share this information with you. The usual caveats that you would expect apply. The report is not the representative views of the Army, just the authors alone. Now, why did we do this? Dismounted infantry troops comprise a disproportionate number of U.S. combat deaths, casualties from World War II to the present. At least 80%, I've seen some estimates as high as 90% or more than 90% of U.S. combat deaths since World War II have been in the infantry. An element of the force that is just a very, very small fraction of the total DoD. How do we get at this problem? One of the challenges here is that anything an infantry soldier brings to battle, he or she has to carry on their back. We give night vision, body armor, more advanced weapons. All of this stuff, extremely valuable, has improved survivability and combat effectiveness in recent conflicts, gives our troops a huge advantage on the battlefield, but it all comes at a very heavy cost in weight. So how do we begin to get at this challenge? And that was core to some of the work that we did. We looked at current protective systems that are very effective. We know they work because we have a track record over the last 18 years of conflict of people who've been shot in body armor. And it works. It stops bullets. I've got friends who've been shot in the plate, and they're fine today. They're walking around because we've been able to give this tremendous, game-changing, life-saving advantage to warfighters. But like I said, it does come at a heavy cost in weight, and there are things that we don't protect against right now. We have learned over these past 2 wars a lot more about traumatic brain injury and the effects of blast exposure from particularly IEDs, but also other sources of blast. Things like shoulder-fired recoilless rifles that our troops carry that have high blast pressure when you shoot these weapons, and the effects on the brain. Currently, we're actually not protecting against that. That's not how our systems are designed. That's not a factor in helmet design. That was one of the things that we came up with as a shortcoming, an area for improvement going forward. I mentioned the weight of these systems. Our body armor systems today weigh 27 pounds for dismounted troops. That's the vest and the helmet. Now, that is more than half of the recommended 50-pound fighting load that service members carry. That comes across study after study that's been done about what dismounted troops should be carrying. Now, the reality is they are carrying much, much more than that, in part because of the advantage of this equipment. But that's another area that we explored, and I'll talk briefly about some recommendations to address that problem that we have. And lastly, despite these advantages, despite their weight, there are lots of areas of the body that are still unprotected. And we would love to be able to protect people, to armor them against threats in other vulnerable parts of the body. But because of the current weight of these systems, we can't do that yet. We talk about in our report series a strategy to address these shortcomings. 3 kind of main prongs of that strategy. One is to mitigate blast effects to the brain by improving helmet design, while improving our understanding of exactly the mechanisms by which blast pressure affects the brain, which is an area we see evidence that people exposed to blast pressure have negative cognitive effects on the brain. But exactly what that link is, how it's occurring, is an area where there's still a lot of work to be done in terms of the basic science. The second one is optimizing body armor design and use in the field by changing some of our policies to give more flexibility to commanders on the ground and lightening some of this load. And the last one is to capitalize on emerging technologies like exoskeletons and some other ones that I'll talk about that have potential to really start to change this dynamic. In terms of the first line of effort, mitigating blast-induced TBI, you'll find in the hardcopy report there's a whole bunch of recommendations, but I just want to highlight 2 really key things that we'd like to see DoD do, the opportunities to do better going forward. One is changing the design of our helmets. There have been computational studies, computer simulations that have shown that a full-face helmet would decrease the blast pressure going into the brain by up to 80%. So that's an area where we recommend further exploration, trying to better understand how that works in different environments, different kinds of blasts, try to quantify that better, but then also understand what are the trade-offs, because there are trade-offs in weight, in reduced situational awareness, and are there some environments where those trade-offs are worth it? Maybe it's a turret gunner whose head is exposed. Maybe it's somebody firing a weapon that has high blast pressure. And to think smartly about situations where we decide we're going to do better protection for helmets, which again currently don't even have a requirement to protect against blast pressure. And the second, to establish a blast surveillance program. One of the areas we've seen technology evolve really incredibly in the past couple of years is better monitoring devices. And today we can put small sensors on a service member that can detect blast pressure and record that data, and then allow us to then begin to sync up that data to medical outcomes, which in many cases are delayed. We might diagnose mild traumatic brain injury years after the fact, but recording that data and building a comprehensive database of service member blast exposures can allow us to both better understand the science of what's happening, but also better provide medical care to veterans afterwards if they've been exposed and had effects later on. We've also found opportunities right now today to improve how we manage the weight burden with some of these systems. Things like clearly delegating authority to commanders in the field that allow them to set the protection level, that allow them to base the protection level of what people are going to wear based on other factors that might be the environment, the mission, maybe the same protection level that you have riding in a vehicle or doing a very short dismounted movement where you get out of a vehicle and go inside a building is not the same protection level and weight that you need if you're hiking in the mountains of Afghanistan at 10,000 feet on a multi-day mission. And this is an issue that we heard up and down people we talked to in the Army is not, really an issue of what the rule is on paper. It's about leadership. It's about concern for good reason about casualties, but an area where there's an opportunity for leadership in the Army, working with folks in OSD and with Congress to give more authority to people on the ground to make the right call that matters in that particular situation. And there are also opportunities to improve the actual design of systems today without sacrificing protection. There was a GAO study last year that said that body armor is actually over-designed for the current threat. That's good. If you had to pick one of the two, you'd rather be over-designed than under-designed. But that does mean that we have weight that we don't need, and there are opportunities to change the design to reduce weight without actually sacrificing protection at all. And the last main line of effort is capitalizing on emerging technologies that can begin to really radically transform this. So we're not looking at small incremental gains at a 5%, a 10% reduction in weight, but actually transformative changes that might change the dynamic on the battlefield that infantry troops face. We'll have a demonstration of exoskeletons as one way to get at that. Other ways are robotic technologies, teammates that might offload weight, that could carry rucksacks, could carry more ammunition, as well as human performance enhancement technology. We talk about this in one of our reports. The most recent one that just came out looks at both physical and cognitive performance enhancement technologies that are real today, some of which have risks that we need to measure the trade-offs with their value, but others of which are reasonably safe, particularly in the area of cognitive performance enhancement. And the side effects are well understood. There is some work going on in pockets of DoD, but this is an area that DoD really has not looked at hard, is underinvested in, and underexplored the value of this. And so one of our recommendations is that DoD launch a comprehensive human performance enhancement program, put someone in charge at the department level to begin to investigate this technology, and then use it on a case-by-case basis where the benefit outweighs some of the side effects. This and other and some of the other details that are in our report series have, we think, tremendous potential to begin to get at this problem. This is clear that this is of a high priority to the department. Secretary Mattis has established a new close combat lethality task force focused on this challenge. How do we better protect these folks who are out on the front lines? How do we change this dynamic in terms of having such a disproportionate amount of our casualties in this one slice of the force? The good news is that there are good opportunities to start to get at this problem. And so we'd like to see DoD do more in this space. Again, please check out the report, full report online. I'm going to turn things over now to Keith Maxwell from Lockheed Martin. We've got a short video, and then Keith will come up and talk about their exoskeleton prototype, the ONYX, and then we'll have a chance to do a Q&A afterwards and ask some questions about it. Thanks very much.
So good morning. My name is Keith Maxwell. I'm from Lockheed Martin. I run the exoskeleton program. You're looking here at an ONYX exoskeleton. It is a prototype of what we are developing for the Army under an OTA with the Natick Soldier Research Development Engineering Center. I am both proud and humbled to be able to announce today that as of yesterday, Popular Science magazine, they gave us the grand prize for the best new technology of 2018 in the security category. So this is kind of a big deal for us. If you're looking for the press release, it's out on our website. But yeah, it's one of these technologies that's certainly captivated the imaginations of a lot of people. But what I'm really here to do today is get past the imaginary and dive into the reality of what an exoskeleton is and what it's not, and how we can use this technology to improve soldier performance on the battlefield. So if you think about an exoskeleton system as an Iron Man, you've watched too much TV, you've watched too many movies. That's not what we do here. The idea is not to pick up cars and throw them. The idea is that we're going to take the capabilities of some of the fittest, highest performing individuals in the world, these infantry guys that you were just talking about, and we're going to extend those capabilities. We're going to make them stronger, we're going to make them last longer, and we're going to make them go faster and farther. We're going to take them that extra mile. So a lot of times we talk about how hard these jobs are. I don't know how many folks in here, anybody have some military background behind them in the room? Yeah, anybody hump a ruck? Yeah. If you're doing that for any length of time, you get hurt, and there's a reason why. The Army says you're supposed to carry 40 pounds of load. That's what you're supposed to carry. In basic training, that's what you carry, 40 pounds of load. You saw the statistics. We're talking 90 to 140, and I've seen loads bigger than that amongst soft guys. So literally, we're overburdening the soldier with all this cool, high-speed, low-drag, lightweight gear that adds up over time, right? Does it make them more capable? Absolutely. So what do we do about it? I mean, we can't make human beings much bigger. I mean, if we had a program here for like bovine injections of something to make them enormous, that might be a program, but that's not something that's ethical, and it's not something we're going to try and do. We're going to focus on mechanical means to go ahead and increase the capability of human beings. There's a man-machine interface, and that man-machine team is basically what you're looking at here. What does this help me do? Well, if I can carry a 150-pound load, I can still carry a 150-pound load. But I will go further with it. I will be able to carry that the distance that I need to go, and then when I get there, I am a whole lot fresher to go ahead and do the job that I'm there for, right? Because my job is not just to carry a heavy load from place to place. We have mules. We had mules in the 1800s. We have robotic mules today that you can carry those loads. But I need personal gear on my person as a soldier because that's what's important to me. If my stuff's over there and I have a problem over here, I want it on me. That's the functionality that an exoskeleton brings. It's a very personal load carriage device. It brings this ability right down to the individual. It also provides me a whole bunch of capability I didn't know I had, right? Because I sense things, my system senses things. It tells me about where it is in space. So the minute I step off a vehicle where there's a GPS, and I'm now in a GPS-denied environment, I have inertial navigation. I know where I am in space. I can tell other people where I am in space. I can transmit that information about where I am in space. I can sense what the soldier is doing. I can sense the motion. I can tell whether he's on the deck or he's standing up. I can tell whether they're sweating profusely. I can tell whether their heart rate is too high. I can tell whether they're having some sort of a difficulty. I could sense blood on the surface of their skin. I can do these things, and I can send that information out across the squad. And what does that do for me? Well, when your sergeant asks, "Hey, Private, how you feeling?" And he says, "I'm good. I'm good, Sarge. I'm good." I know he's underhydrated. He's dehydrated. He's exhausted. I'm looking at the dipoles of the energy use in his muscles, and I know that he's not good to go anymore. I know these things. And that readiness helps me to understand what the decision-making process is going forward. Now, is that part of the current Army program? No. The current Army program right now is all about this. It's all about making this system work, but Lockheed Martin is doing all these other things in addition, pushing that roadmap forward because we're looking at what the technology will do for us, not just now, not in the next 2-3 years, but in the next 20 years. What do we want to achieve with soldiers to make them that fighting force that's unstoppable, unbeatable, dominant on the battlefield? I'm going to open up a little bit to questions, things that you might want to know about the system, how it operates, how it works. And then after that, Paul and I will answer your questions.
Thanks, Keith. So thank you so much. What we do is, why don't you grab a seat? I'm going to fire at you a couple questions that I think people may want to know about the suit. We'll just knock them out of the way now,
Okay.
and then we'll open it up to questions from everybody. First, tell us about some of the technical specs. So how much does the suit weigh?
This system weighs 19.5 pounds. We're going to try and take some of the weight out of the system. But literally, I'm not feeling this on my body. I don't feel the weight of the system, mostly because it's pushing me along. So it's reducing the amount of energy I actually put into the effort to go do what I'm doing.
We talked about this beforehand. Help maybe paint a picture for people about when you say it's reducing the amount of energy. Can you quantify it a little bit? You give an example of people doing squats, which I thought was pretty telling.
Sir, so we'll talk a little bit about the squat exercise. We took the system out to AP Hill. We put some Army operators in the system. At the beginning of the day, when guys were fresh, the soldier knocked out 26 repetitions, lifting a 185-pound barbell doing squats. And then at the end of the day, after we traversed miles, the guys had run up and down 5 flights of stairs. They had navigated underground through a culvert, a tunnel for half a mile, something like that, in full mop gear. So these guys were tired at the end of the day. When the guy put this system on, got underneath that barbell and knocked out 72 repetitions, that pretty much told us everything that we needed to know. It's remarkable how much more energy this system is providing to the soldier.
Talk to me about endurance. What's the endurance of this?
So battery life is about 8 hours on a set of 2 BB2590 lithium-ion rechargeable batteries. We have the ability to go up to 4 of those batteries, so for a 16-hour battery life. Our metric was originally 1 cycle of darkness, right? So if we want to be able to put guys on patrol for 4 to 8 hours, 4 hours, we doubled it. At 8 hours, we can double it again to 16 hours.
So this has been one of the areas where we've seen a huge change in just the past couple of years. People who've been following this technology, you may know that a few years ago, It's very different. You're looking at maybe 1 to 2 hours out of endurance. So what's been the big difference in getting you to 8 to 16 hours now?
I think there's multiple improvements that have been made. Certainly in the area of battery chemistry, there's been some progress, but the 2590 was our early choice on a program that we started 10 years ago. The issue there was weight. So if you have an exoskeleton that weighs 80-something pounds, and you have a soldier in it who weighs 200-something pounds, and then you put 180 pounds of load on them, pretty quickly you're, 500-pound thing, you're a motorcycle living in space, and that requires a lot of energy to move. Suddenly when you drop that 80-pound exoskeleton weight to 19.5 pounds, you don't have as much to move. And we're actuating fewer joints. We're getting more out of what we do. So the efficiencies there are greater. And so the things that we learned about weight and about where to actuate and the efficiencies that we can gain made all the difference in the world. Now we can use less power to go a lot longer.
Now, you talk about sort of joint specific. So what you have here is across the knee joints.
That's correct.
And that's what it's actuating. It's actuating basically helping your muscles move when you would move your knees.
Essentially, it's substituting for the quadriceps muscles, the large muscles of the upper leg, and the tibialis anterior, the large muscle that goes down the front of the leg. Most of us become familiar with that muscle when we overrun a little bit, when we start our running career, and you feel pain in that front we call shin splints.
Right. Now, talk to me about in the longer term, opportunities to continue to expand this across other joints and what that looks like.
So we're at the very early stages now of having conversations about actuating the ankles and the hips. We've done both. We have prototypes that do both. And what that does is that extends the range of activities under which you're gaining augmentation, performance augmentation. So in this system, it's primarily knee-intensive type activities, right? And when we talk about knee-intensive activities, from a soldier perspective, what are we talking about? We're talking about the hardest parts of their job. Go climb that mountain. Go descend that mountain. Go pick up that heavy load, whether it's an artillery round or a pallet of MREs, or a casualty evacuation. I mean, those type things. Those are all knee-intensive activities. For level terrain walking, there's an ankle, and that ankle provides us a lot of assistance. You got to remember that the human body is really, really efficient, right? If you look at the way performance athletes run, they can go for a lot of miles, right? I mean, we got people who literally run 100-mile races. You got Kenyans who are performing in these marathons, and they're at world record paces. The human body is really efficient. For us to outperform the human body, which is what we're doing here with this system, that's remarkable.
So a lot of the examples that you were giving there of things soldiers have to do require a lot of agility, a lot of movement around. Talk to me about that. Does the suit hamper agility? What can you do in this that soldiers might have to, they got to get on the ground, they got to lay on the prone, they've got to jump up, and they got to move under fire. How does this affect that?
So one of the very first things that we did was we had our university research partners do some evaluation. And they wanted to look at range of motion. And one of the first things they said is, you don't have a limit. Everything that the human body does, you can do here, with the exception that I can't literally turn my knee outwards, which you wouldn't want to do anyway. So things like that, within normal range of motion, we can do all that. Getting up, getting down, these things are important. I mean, if you talk about from a soldier perspective, 3 and 5 second rushes, you've got to run forward, hit the ground, roll, get back up. That's important. This system is literally providing you with the extra oomph at the legs, at the quads, that's doing that lifting movement to get you back up and off the ground. So, no, there are no restrictions in terms of range of motion. And yes, you can do those things that are typically thought of as combat type maneuver.
Okay, last question for you, then we'll open it up to the audience. What does it feel like to wear it, to walk around in it?
So the very first time I put it on, it was a strange sensation. It was sort of like putting a live animal on. right? Because it moves and it's responding to me. So if you've ever ridden a horse or had that kind of an experience where you've got something that is moving, and then every time you put a little input in, put the reins this way, the horse goes this way, it's kind of that experience. That's the first impression. And by now, I've been in this thing for hundreds of hours, I no longer have that impression. What I have is this deep appreciation for how intuitive it is. No matter what I do, it just does it. It gets out of my way. It provides the assistance that I asked for. I don't have to think through, well, am I in the right configuration to do this thing? It just behaves naturally. So I'm riding the wave of this stiff wind at my back when I'm walking in it. I'm getting up and I'm not thinking about it. I'm just, that's all, Jay. Do whatever you want to do. It does those things, and I don't have to think about it. It's just whatever behavior I want to engage in.
Okay, that's very cool. Okay, we have some folks with microphones. So if you have a question, just raise your hand, and we'll have someone running to you with a microphone. I'd ask, please stand up, introduce yourself and where you're from, and then if you have a long-winded comment, that's totally fine. Please just end it in a question. Yes, there was a gentleman back here.
Hi, Matt Baynard from Defense Daily. Two questions. One, when did Lockheed enter into the OTA with the Army? And then two, I believe in the report we have here, it states a recommendation of the Army going after a acquisition strategy for an exoskeleton within 5 years and potential fielding within 10. Does that fit in with your projected development timeline?
So the OTA award was the end of September. And in terms of what the fielding schedule is for the Army, I would refer you to the Army because Mr. David Audette, who is the Army's program manager, is here in the room, and he'd be able to answer that question better than I would.
Yes, we had a question up here.
Hi, Rob Levinson, Bloomberg Government. Again, two quick questions. You mentioned the endurance about the squats, the number of squats. Does it actually increase the amount you could squat? In other words, does it increase your strength? And the second is, talk a little bit about the reliability of the system, particularly in, say, a combat environment. When you're jumping up, hitting down, if it takes a round, what's the durability in a realistic environment? Thanks.
Sure. So from the standpoint of what can I really do with it that I couldn't do before, I can give you some anecdotal differences. So when the operators are going to go down into the sewer system and then make that traverse, typically there's two guys. They use this big universal key. They get there and they lift and they pull that manhole cover, 350-something pounds, something like that, off the grid. Using the system took one guy. So there's a difference. What does that really mean? Well, if one guy can do it, then I've got one more guy with a gun pointed somewhere else. My safety goes up. In terms of reliability, this system, as I wear it, is in its literally second year of use. And I mean, it gets daily use, and we have had 0 failures. At the end of the evaluation period, we're gonna go build a number of these systems. The Army is going to go test them in a combat realistic environment, and at that time, this system will be hardened for that purpose. I mean, this is a prototype. The pretty blue color is nice, but it doesn't blend well with the environment. But literally, this will be ready for that environment.
It may add a little weight when you do that.
There is a possibility that will happen. Again, our objective is to keep it at 19.5 pounds or less. So we will take some weight out of places, and we may have to add it back in for ruggedization.
Thanks. Okay, yes, sir.
Hi, John Grady, Naval Institute News. Question, what about the Marines and Special Forces in this? Have they contributed anything, or are you even talking to them?
So that the SOF community is very much aware of what we're doing, and the Marines are very much aware of what we're doing, and all of that is being coordinated through the Natick Soldier Research Development Engineering Center.
Yes, Jay.
Jay Donnelly, Huntington Ingalls Industries. There may be application for this exoskeleton in a manufacturing environment outside of the military. When might it be available for testing in that environment?
That's a really great question. I can tell you now that Lockheed Martin is establishing an industry consortia of some of the largest industrial manufacturers in the aerospace and automotive industry. We're also looking at the oil and gas industry to join us. The first meeting of that consortia will be on the 28th of January.
Phil, yes, in the back.
Hey, just one quick question to follow up on your discussion about weight and battery resiliency. When you say it's 16 hours, it's 16 hours at what load? And then also, if you could just let us know when you're talking about, I know you haven't got a cost estimate yet, but what is your target? You know, what's your goal for cost, considering the fact that there would have to be purchases of quite a lot of these in order to make them effective for all the infantry, or a big chunk of them? Thanks.
So in terms of endurance, when I give you that 8 to 16 hour, that's in full use. That is full load. I'm moving out with a backpack. I'm moving. It's right now I'm burning no energy. I'm operating a computer that's just kind of recording where I am in space. So I'm burning very little battery. When I'm moving, when I'm either on a treadmill or out on open terrain moving, then I'm burning battery, and that battery burn is 8 hours.
Sorry, just to be clear. So full load means what? How much?
Full load to me means 80 to 100 pound load on my body.
Okay.
And then on the price?
Oh, yeah, did you want to address that?
Sure, I was trying to avoid that one. So no, I can't actually give you any price information. Literally, and it's not because I don't want to, it's that I don't know what the final configuration of this system is going to look like or what the volumes are. And those are the two primary factors that drive the cost of these things to manufacture, and that drives the price. So when I have a solid idea of what the final form factor of this will look like and the volumes, I'll be able to give you a price.
It could be millions?
Pardon?
Millions of dollars each one?
Per copy?
I'm asking you, we have no idea.
No. We're in tens of thousands of dollars. No.
Yes, right.
Hi, Wes Morgan with Politico. I'm just trying to understand, how are you envisioning this thing being used? Would you put, a copy on every ranger in a platoon and they can all go running out of the helicopter to their target, or just some guys in a platoon, or is this sort of too far out to even be thinking about how a particular, how it would actually be employed in combat, or this or its son or grandson?
I'll tell you honestly, I have my ideas about how I think that the Army and the Marine Corps and SOF might employ this technology. That's kind of irrelevant. The folks who are going to make that decision are the Army. A lot of that's going to happen through PEO Soldier and TRADOC, and they're going to determine who and what and how many and how they're going to do it.
Tony.
Hi, Tony Spadaro. Remember the old joke about the thermos where it doesn't, how does it know what to do? How is this sensing that, for example, your quadricep is going to be under load?
Okay.
Does it positional? Is it neurological? What's going on in here?
So right now it's positional. There are a series of sensors in this device that are telling me what the angle and rate of my leg are in space, right? So that's what that is. As we go forward, there are new and advancing control schemes that we're going to overlay on top of this. And a lot of those focus on the electromagnetic signal the electromyography from the brain to the muscle, where we can read that dipole and then tell what the purpose and intent of the user is. There are even more advanced areas of this technology that we're beginning to look at that are still relatively low TRL. I think I said it before. I'm looking at the now. You're looking at a now technology that should be ready for field test and evaluation here this summer and fall. But Lockheed Martin is not looking at the here and now as the only. We're looking at the here and now as the absolute necessity to go get this technology ready for a soldier so that in 10 years' time I can have a technology that is ubiquitous, that is extraordinary, that does things that today we think of as only science fiction.
Yes, all the way in the back. Oh, behind you. Yes. Sorry.
Two questions. The first question is, has it been tested on women? And
yes.
And the second question is, I guess we were thinking about what happens if this gets in enemy hands. So how could it be hacked and can it be deactivated? Let's say someone dies with it on. Can it be remotely deactivated or can it be hacked?
So the system is resizable. Let me start with your first question. It is absolutely been tested on women. The person who runs in my program the human factors is a young lady by the name of Christine Sleppy, and she is in this system daily, and she's telling us about it from a female perspective. What is this doing for me? How does this need to fit me better? One of our other, our chief programmer, Robin Adams, she's in the system all the time. She's telling us about it. When we take it out in the field, we make certain that we literally put it on both men and women because we want them to understand that literally it makes everyone stronger. It makes everyone better. So I hope that answers that first question really, really well. Now remind me what the second part of that was?
I asked about the security on it, so whether it could be hacked and whether it could be turned off remotely.
Right. So there is no ability currently to send a signal to the system that would override its programming. There is a tablet right now, an application that plugs into the little control unit here, and with that, all I'm doing is I'm taking my particular anthropometry and the metrics associated with the system on my body, and I'm calibrating it to myself, and then the operating system is resident. It just works. The other part of that is, should it fall into enemy hands, can it be deactivated? Lockheed Martin has an entire program which is all about built-in security, right? So that we don't have that. We have chips that you can't hack, or at least today you can't hack. Maybe someday in the future you can hack. But today they're not hackable. And with that technology and the way the system is currently configured, where there's nothing about it that can be changed without that tablet, you're golden. It's secure.
Richard.
Richard Fontaine, CNES. I work here.
If you guys don't know, Richard Fontaine is the president of CNES.
Everybody else has two questions, so I think I'm going to ask two as well. The first is, if you have a sense, either of you actually, about where this kind of effort in the U.S. military stands vis-a-vis other advanced militaries. If this went into the field, would we be the first by a long margin? Are the Chinese or the Russians, the Israelis, others, developing technologies similar or more advanced? Sort of where are we compared to other militaries? And then the second question is more just of a speculative one. It covers about maybe half of your body, but there's half at least that it doesn't. What is the potential for exoskeletons of torso or that have built-in body armor, arms, etc., things like that?
Wow, hard question. Let me see if I can answer that in pieces. In terms of an upper body, there's a reason why we're not doing an upper body at the moment, and that is this is a load carriage device. So being able to just transport the guy around, that's the important part. You might notice that everyone here's arms rest at their sides, and there's a good reason for that, because metabolically putting your hands up requires an awful lot of energy, and you don't want to do that. So any kind of a system that you would use in the field, the objective there is how do you drive down the energy cost associated with that, and what's the real utility in having that upper body strength. For a logistics type application, there is great utility, and so as part of our program, we are looking at these new technologies. We tend to, instead of trying to invent big, we'll license some of these things. So as you report this, I'm certain I'll get a bunch of phone calls about, I have a cool new upper body exoskeleton. Can I sell it to you? So that's part of that end of the program. The other thing is that body armor and that have already been integrated with this system in an earlier iteration. So if anybody saw the Talos program, the Mark 1 Charlie, that was built off the foundational technology on which ONYX is built. So the early KSRD was the foundational technology. That was a Natick brainchild. They assembled that entire thing together. It had soldier cooling, some high-speed optics, and body armor that covered 60%, I believe, of the body. So yeah, it's already been done. So bringing that back to this may eventually be the path, but I'm not going to decide that.
Let me jump in here. To your second question, Richard, there are other companies building suits that are coming from the other direction as well, right? So other companies that are looking at sort of the full-size suit. We talk about this in detail in one of the reports in the series on emerging technologies, and kind of what the state of that technology is. I'm not here to tell you what design is best. There's a lot of options out there. But that's certainly one approach that people are coming at. Because if ultimately you want to increase the level of protection, you do need to be able to add more armor and then increase the total weight carrying capacity of the person. To the question about foreign countries, I'm gonna offer up a lifeline here. Do you have an opinion? Do you want to jump in on the Russian side? All right. So everyone, Sam Bendit from CNA follows Russian robotics. You're the expert on this far more than I am.
I appreciate that. Thanks for a shout out. In fact, Russian Federation is building several exoskeletons. They had trouble building out a full body kind of a Halo Master Sergeant type of suit because of the energy issues. But right around the same time as your report came out, they released a video of an exoskeleton light, which they supposedly tested in Syria, which has no battery pack and is built out of light polymers. In fact, they nearly tested it out in combat, as the video shows. And I think I tweeted it out. I think you have a copy, Paul. I can resend it. So there are lots of solutions out there and lots of approaches. And, of course, China and other countries are also working on that as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Sam. Appreciate it. Yes, other questions? Yes, up here. Scott. So folks who don't know, Scott Cheney-Peters also wrote a CNS report several years ago on maritime applications of exosuits and exoskeletons.
Hi, thanks for that. And so speaking in a personal capacity, I work for the government now. But I was just wondering, in your research, and you made a lot of compelling arguments for the use cases that you stated for this powered exoskeleton. And I was wondering if you could discuss a little bit about the trade-offs that you've seen between powered and unpowered exoskeletons, and whether there might be some compelling use cases for unpowered exoskeletons.
I would say that there's a very compelling use case for unpowered exoskeletons. So under the Lockheed Martin umbrella, I have a system that's for industrial purposes called the Fortis. It is an unpowered passive exoskeleton. It's designed around the idea that you're going to suspend a heavy tool out here, take that load away from the arms, shoulders, neck, back, and transfer it down through the legs to the ground. So the Navy has tested it extensively. We've had it in our own factories. We're doing work on the C-130J wing panel assemblies using our exoskeleton. Boeing has it in their factories. A bunch of other companies who don't want to be mentioned have it in their factories. We're on 5 continents in about 5 different industries. with a passive exoskeleton. So yes, there is a definite use case for that. I can tell you what the absolute wrong use case for a passive exoskeleton is: a mobility solution. Because basically what you've just done is taken whatever the weight of the exoskeleton is and made it part of your walking around. So whether or not it takes load off of your spinal column or not, it is putting it somewhere and you don't want it on your body.
And if folks want to know more about that, Scott's report that he was a co-author on is available online. A couple years ago, from Iron Man to Aquaman. Is that right?
Something like that. Yeah. Between, I think.
Iron Man, Aquaman, CNAS, you'll find it. It's great on maritime applications of exoskeletons. Yes, sir.
Have you sort of during?
Can you just wait? Hold on. We've got a live stream, so we want to make sure that we capture you on the live.
Thank you, Peter Nielsen from the Danish Embassy. Have you, during the development of the prototype, sort of recognized any adverse consequences for the body, because it's sort of support one part of the body, but of course not others?
Right. So I've heard that question phrased in many different ways. You're saying if you're adding in strength, are we taking something away from the person somehow, or are we changing their gait in some way that might adversely affect their bodies? And in both cases, no. We haven't seen that as an effect. I believe Natick did a pretty exhaustive study that basically says that if you're in good condition, good physical condition, and you're using the system, that you're going to stay in good physical condition. And by the way, being in that good physical condition makes you a better exoskeleton operator, because you're getting more advantage for the amount of energy that you're putting into the system. From the standpoint of, can we hurt somebody by changing their gait? We began with a system 10 years ago that had a sole, right? A separate sole, and it was something that was underneath your foot. And not only was that problematic from the standpoint of it was a trip hazard, and again, remember, it weighed 85 pounds, and you put a 100-pound pack on that, and I'm surprised I still have a face left, because I went down a number of times with that, and it hurt. But no, you'll notice this does not have a separate sole. I literally have my foot in contact with the ground. And when I transfer load, when we use the device that goes around the shin plate to the ground, again, my foot is in contact with the ground. I am transferring load, but my feet are in contact with the ground. So that gives me that agility, and it prevents me from having to change my gait. So anything that would force me to walk in a certain way, whether that was robotic stomping or, my legs are more widely dispersed, that change in gait has the potential to injure somebody, right? Because your gait's unique. With a 96 percentile certainty, I can see you out there at half a mile away with imaging, and I go, hey, that's the guy from the Danish Embassy, right? I can do that. So that's why we need to absolutely not interfere with your gait. Yes, sir.
Hey, I'm Brendan Coyne from Booz Allen. Could you talk a little bit more about some of the biometric sensors? You said that, you said it was beyond the current scope of bare minimum of what you were trying to field and test right now. But you've mentioned a number of times different ways of measuring signals and hydration and et cetera.
So some of that, as you might imagine, might be a little proprietary, and so I won't share a great amount of detail. But we do have several different technologies. One of which is a patch from a great company called Reuters, and that goes on the skin, and it can be used for an awful lot of different sensing. Right? It allows us to sense an awful lot of different things, and whether that's an EMG signal or heartbeat, respiration, perspiration, some of those different things, they're all available to you. Anybody who's ever been kitted up in an exoskeleton, anybody who's ever been kitted up with sensors all over their body, know that there's a rat's nest of wires that goes with that. And we don't like rat's nests of wires. I mean, A, they're uncomfortable, and B, even if you have a shirt with all that stuff embedded in it, it's uncomfortable. It pulls the hair on your chest, and it's really unpleasant. So we're trying to get away from that as well. And so there are technologies that are proprietary to Lockheed Martin right now that literally have no contact with the skin that will sense a lot of these different abilities, these heartbeat, respiration, perspiration, blood, the electric dipole, all those things, and allow us to actuate the system and provide a whole bunch of health and wellness monitoring for the soldier.
Are there any other questions? I thought I'd seen a couple of hands here. Yes. All right. You're going to get the last question, sir.
Charles Perkins, APAC. Most of the questions I had actually were already answered. So if I could just jump in with a couple of detailed questions. One, is there any kind of a gyroscopic or stability element at all? In other words, to sort of akin to a Segway that can monitor that? And if so, are there, and totally beyond the defense sphere, for seniors, the 80 years plus demographic, does that have some applications for them? And secondly, I think you addressed a little bit of this in terms of how much energy is used, and you said no reduction in fitness, but I'm thinking of the situation when an astronaut comes down from the space station after many months and he can barely walk. Is there a dependence element that the body tolerates this so much that in comparison, if there are any tasks, hard tasks that are required, and this isn't available or it's not part of the TTP to use it, what impact does that have on the soldier's readiness?
From the standpoint of allowing folks who are elderly or with disabilities to go ahead and use a similar type system, there is a sister product to this called the Kyogo out of our partners company in Canada, Batemia, and that system is currently being used for that purpose specifically. They're going through FDA quals now to go ahead and be able to distribute that worldwide. In terms of reducing your personal muscle strength, that's really not what this system is about. So I'm always asked the question, how much more can I do? And I say, how much can you do now? Because if you can lift 150 pounds and carry 150 pounds now, you're going to be able to lift and carry 150 pounds with the system, and you're going to go further. You're going to go longer. You're going to be able to do that. What you're going to see in terms of, so from a purely a tactical perspective, when we talk about how hard it is to keep up with the enemy, right? I mean, when we were in the really horrible days in Afghanistan in the Korengal, and the guys were just getting frustrated, man, they were pulling plates out and throwing them down. They were upset because they couldn't keep up. Because what happened is the enemy got maneuver dominance, right? He could run up into those hills, and while you were hoofing it trying to get up there, he could go set up the next ambush, and then the next ambush, and then the next ambush. We want to be able to keep pace with that guy. And so this is what's going to help us to do that. The same amount of protection, the same amount of new, cool, high-speed gear, but we want to be able to eliminate that maneuver dominance. We want that maneuver dominance on the battlefield. That's what we really want.
Yeah, I just had, so can you talk about the press release that dropped today for the $6.9 million for the optimization?
Sure. So, so I'm being reminded here that yes, we have a brand new OTA with the United States Army. There's a press release that is out on the Lockheed Martin website. It is a $6.9 million development effort that is being coordinated very closely with the Army. We are working with elements of the 10th Mountain to go ahead and test and evaluate these systems. We are working with our own partners, Batemia in Quebec, with the University of Florida, with Boston Engineering, a small engineering firm in New England, Massachusetts. And we are pushing ahead on taking this prototype and turning it into a very rugged, military-ready piece of kit. So.
That's great. Thanks. That's great to hear. I'm glad to hear the Army's moving forward on this. I wish they'd had this in my day. I look forward to the day when troops have something like this that they can go use out in the field. Thanks so much for coming in. Thank you all for coming. And like I said, if you're interested in more information, please check it out on our website, cnas.org/supersoldiers. Thanks so much.